Kim Namjoon was first drawn to the art world because of boredom. He explains in a thoughtful podcast episode of Intersections, the Art Basel podcast. BTS was touring in the United States and Europe in 2018, and the group's leader needed something to fill the hours between performances and rehearsals. Since he didn't have many friends abroad at the time, he found himself at the Art Institute of Chicago. In art museums, he found a place to experience beautiful historic works and began to see his own life and art in a larger context. Art made intimate. They're all dead, he laughed slightly on the podcast, referencing artists like Picasso and Monet. But for now, in 2018, some outsider from South Korea in here, in this small room, me and his footprint, or some pieces of his time, just encountered and still gives me a thrill. The podcast was recorded before announced the news of their second chapter, which would focus on solo activities in addition to continued work as a group after a break of some kind. So far, BTS Chapter 2 has included Paris Fashion Week shows, a new single, shirtless photos, rest and relaxation, and an album announced from J-Hope. While the initial news was met with a chaotic reaction from various sides, Namjoon's newest interview provides more insight into the reflection he's been doing lately, and how he's preparing for the next era of his life as a person, not just as the leader of the biggest band in the world. I don't like to divide the art world, but when I see the painters and visual artists, most of them get their fame after their death. Their soul is really a long period thing, Namjoon shared early on the episode of Intersections. Because somebody paints this in their 20s, changes their paintings in their 30s, starts to make a sculpture in their 40s. So when I see them, I could be brave because I'm 29 in Korea. So when we turn 30 is a different thing. I'm still a young man, but in a world of boy bands, turning into 30 is something different in K-pop. That's really sad, but it's a fact. BTS's engagement with the soul is very well documented, but it feels interesting to hear Namjoon's phrase as a career in life in that way. The soul is a long time thing. It's not a flame to be extinguished when it begins to flicker differently, smaller, brighter, in alternating intervals, depending on the wind passing through it. He returned to the idea later in the podcast with a specific example. The artist Philip Guston, who was known for shifting over the course of his lifetime with abstract paintings to at times controversial figurative work, influenced by the political movements of the 60s and 70s. Because he changed his style and bravely encountered with the issues and traumas of his young life, he could be Guston himself, Namjoon explained. But Philip Guston, not the member of some Trend or some Time podcast host Mark Spangler, global director of Art Basel, solidified the connection with the earlier part of the conversation about letting yourself evolve, even when it's difficult or uncertain. Life doesn't end at 30. These quotes and related parts of the interview speak to how Namjoon sees himself and BTS in all of these layers of Korean culture, context, and boy band history and popular art. He's part of a big movement, but he's also just a person whose identity is in flux. He hints as much in the Bangtan dinner party when he touches on how after Butter and Permission to Dance, two songs that, while fun in their own ways, also represented a shift in sound for BTS. He didn't know what kind of group we were anymore. What had been in his grasp had slipped out of it without noticing until he had time to reflect. Would you want to change over time, whether that's a Billboard #1 or simply some time to rest? There are many ways to interpret and think about what Namjoon has shared both at the Bangtan dinner party and in the podcast interview, and none is necessarily more correct than the other. When 300 people see the same artwork, they have 300 different feelings. Namjoon said of the experience of sharing his curations with fans, but it feels poignant that he could be talking about existing as part of a bigger picture, and the ensuring pressures that can be a barrier to creating what you want to create, maybe on a more micro level. For those of us who aren't world-famous artists, there's something in reminding yourself about the ways you exist as part of a community and a collective, but also the way you exist as a person trying your best in the world to figure out what only you can do. Even if that's being a supportive friend, an active listener, or a coworker who stands up for what's right in small ways. It's a balance, and it's okay when the balance shifts for a time before tipping back. I really want myself to be calm, and I just want to make my music not caring about other factors, I guess. The thing is that being a team member, it does mean we have to sacrifice our own soul, our own personality. We have to cut it out. Namjoon explained about his work with BTS. Because there are 7 personalities, and we were only 19 or 18 when we started as a team, but now we're almost 30. We became men and adults, so we have different characters or maybe some different future visions. But BTS is still really important to me. It's the biggest part of me. Keeping this intensely as a team made it easy for me to forget who I was and why I started this thing. I just wanted to remind and reminisce with myself why I started this. What can I do with my own thing? He continued. For my 30s, I want to figure out the way to exist halfway for the BTS member and leader RM, and maybe just Kim Namjoon himself. He plans to open a space in Korea for his personal collection, with a cafe and room for people to take their time with discovery. Namjoon praised his love for art very simply on the podcast. The first piece he bought was a small mountain painting by Daewon Lee in 1976. I just liked it. I just bought it, he laughed. It was only once, but he put it on the wall that he began to see a larger vision emerge. His own personal art rabbit hole to mirror armies. It was really strange and something spiritual to me. The soul is a long time thing.
Yeah. Okay. Run. Okay, let's go. 너원 현 100m 우리 자리 학교 끝나면 회사 calling 지금 바로 다 갈게 제발 집엔 보내지 마세요 같은 그날의 꿈꿔 멍청이치라는 듯 I don't wanna go back again Let's go 10년을